Welcome to day 3. I'm very happy you guys are joining me. My name is Steven Petrock, and I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I work for TriMech, and you're here for 60 tips in 60 minutes. This is one of my favorite presentations to give. It's a very fast presentation. I'm going to throw a lot of tips at you. You're going to get more than 60, by the way, okay? But it's going to be a lot of tips coming at you. I can't do that many tips and also include some context around it, so they're really direct to the point, just showcasing what these tips, what these tricks are, okay? Now, there's a couple of reasons why something might wind up in this. Either it's a what's new enhancement that a lot of people might have missed, or it's just genuinely a time-saving tip and trick. And the third reason I include some things in here is because I find that people are accidentally doing some things, or maybe thinking the software is, something weird's happening, and I explain why, so then you can use these things deliberately in the future after you take note of them, okay? So, this is the breakdown of the presentation, so you guys can know how we're breaking this up here. This is more or less the order, using SOLIDWORKS, then navigating around it, sketching parts and assemblies. So that's going to be the breakdown. If you guys want, shoot me an email, hang out after, talk about it if you have any questions. If you stop me in the middle of the presentation, I'm happy to answer it, but then I take no responsibility in going over on time, okay? So, we'll get started. So, tip number 1, this is called the options search. When you call us at tech support and we start to look through to tell you where some options are, we don't have that stuff memorized. We use this all of the time. It's a really quick way to find your system options and your document properties. And as you type them in there, they dynamically appear. So you don't need to commit to memory anymore where these options live in your system options or in your document properties. So let's take a look at this. We hit the gear icon, we go up to our search options, and we just start typing. And as you start typing, these results start to dynamically appear. You can scroll through them, and it takes you directly to your options. So, not just system options, but document properties as well. It's a great thing to keep in your bag of tricks to go through and say, hey, where is that option? I remember I saw it, a year ago, 2 years ago, yesterday. Where is it, right? So that's the options search. Repeat last command. There is a way to access this through the edit menu, but if you just hit the enter key, it'll go back and do the exact same thing that you just did. So it's a quick way to add dimensions or use a sketch tool or a feature command, right? So here I'll add a smart dimension to this. And instead of grabbing smart dimension again, I'll just hit enter. So hitting enter brings you right back into that last command that you were just doing. It works not just for sketching, but features as well. Here I'm doing a split line, and I want to do it again. I just hit enter. I keep going back in there. It's a quick way to reuse a command. So that's the enter key to repeat. Force rebuild. This is a top secret trick that we use when we're teaching classes or on tech support when someone says, hey, my model's not working right, something's not going right, and then you understand this, right? We come up to you or do something, and you're like, how'd you do that? It was not working right for me, now it's working perfectly for you. This is that trick, okay? So remember this. Force rebuild. It is a way to perform a rebuild of the entire feature tree from top to bottom. Okay, so in doing that, it fixes 99% of these weird, funky things that might be going on with your models. All right, so Control Q. Now, all I'm going to showcase here is just the difference between the standard rebuild and the force rebuild. So the standard rebuild is that symbol that's there on the modify box. It's up top in the toolbar. And it only rebuilds geometry that is flagged for a rebuild. Okay, so for example here, if I use that rebuild, only the features that have that symbol on it will be rebuilt. So Control Q goes from top to bottom, rebuilding everything, and I promise you it fixes a lot of things that might be going on with your model. Reference planes. The tip is not that reference planes exist. The tip is 2 ways that you guys can quickly add reference planes. One, on the fly. That's my favorite way to add reference planes. My second favorite way is to add a mid-plane very quickly. So let's take a look at this. So I want to add a reference plane. I hold the Control key and drag away, But the trick is to make sure your mouse is on the edge of the plane. When that crosshairs or that pan symbol comes up, then you're ready to go to add these reference planes. Okay, so control drag, add a reference plane. It is a drag and drop kind of thing, but you can always go in and key in the exact value that you want later. Okay, so quickly adding reference planes. Now here's midplanes. Pre-selecting two faces and then going up to reference geometry and adding a plane will add a midplane on the fly like that. All right, so it's a quick way to add midplanes. That's how I do it all the time. All right, so there was two tricks there with the reference planes. Control drag to pull it away, and then pre-selecting the two faces and then adding a midplane quickly like that. Next is recent files and the welcome screen. Again, this isn't just that these things exist. These are ways that you can use it to help take advantage of the software, okay? So you can browse through all your recent files by hitting the R key. It's been extended to, from 16 in previous releases to up to 100 now. So you can have 100 files in your recents. You can scroll through, find all sorts of files there. But also, there's options. There's extended options for opening a file. And I'll show you that right here. So let's take a look at using recent files. I have a couple pinned on the top. You can see I have those 8 pinned, so I can always get to them. I'll call those my favorites. And then below that, I have just the recent files, things that I've been working on rather recently. You can hit the R key, and here is the recent dialog box here where it lists the thumbnails of up to 100 of those recent files. You can pin it like that, so it's showing up on the top. And then here's those other options. You hit that caret down in the lower right corner. Then you can pick the mode you're opening it in, a configuration, and a display state. So you don't have to open it up and then do things later, right? You can open deliberately the configuration, the display state, and the mode that you want to use when you're going to open up that file. So it could be a huge time saving. And then also, this is just the welcome screen here. It's got a lot of things, recent folder paths, links to learn, alerts from the RSS feed. So there's a lot there. Consider using that. Reload. I use this all the time, maybe because I don't do any real work, but I just do a lot of demonstrations. So if I'm in there and I am just modeling and I need to reopen the part, I'd close it, I don't save it, and then I reopen it to get back to where I was. The reload command will do that for you automatically. So if you're from the Adobe community, it's similar to the revert command in Adobe. So let's take a look at that. Say, for example, I'm working on this product, and I get super distracted, and I do something very silly, like that. I made a very important line of sketch geometry. Then errors, and now it doesn't look like a jug. I don't even know what I was doing. So I would close, don't open, and save. Well, you can use the reload command. This will automate that. It will identify if changes have occurred, right? That's highlighted in red. You're going to lose that data, but that's okay. Now I'm back to the last saved point. Another tip here, no video for this, but just pointing this out. At the top, that asterisk next to the part name means whatever is working on hasn't yet been saved to the disk. So a lot of people ask that, and I wanted to just point that out here. So bonus tip, 6B, asterisk. 7, the context menu. Now this is a great way to work in what we call this heads-up modeling environment, right? So you can minimize your mouse movement, right? So you can really reduce your mouse mileage, we call it. You want to focus on your design instead of going up to the command manager, over to the feature tree, right, all over the screen, windshield washing. You want to be focused on your design. So a great way to do that is to use the context menu. However, it can be frustrating because if you don't go directly to the context menu, that window will disappear. It is really passive-aggressive in that way. It's like, okay, if you don't want to pay attention to me, I'm just going to be gone forever. So here's how you can get it back. So let's take a look first at the the context menu here, right? It's a great way to add mates like that on the fly. But if I don't go directly to it, it disappears. Okay, so there I am. I go away from it. It's gone. Now, how do I get it back? Well, I move my mouse back to the area where it was, and then I hit the control key, and it brings it back for you, so you can have access to that. Okay? So control key brings back the context menu. The D key, similar, basically a similar concept to modeling with the context menu, except this has a lot more power to it, okay? The D key was added a few years ago, and it came with breadcrumbs. And using breadcrumbs, using breadcrumbs basically means you can model with the feature tree hidden, because anything you click on, you can get directly into everything you'd want. The features, the sketches, the mates if it's a part, right? It's all context sensitive, and it brings you directly to where you want to be. So let's take a look at that. So this is the D key and breadcrumbs combined here. So I hit the D key, and it brings these breadcrumbs right to my mouse pointer. If I don't hit the D key, what happens is the breadcrumbs are going to be up in the upper left corner, which isn't a useful place for it to be. Okay, so I can get access to everything, right? I click on that face, and it brings up everything, the sketch, the feature, all the fillets around it. Here, if I hit the D key, it brings the breadcrumbs to my mouse pointer, and now I have access to all of the mates in that part, the body, the feature, everything right at my mouse pointer. And that's using breadcrumbs, which has been there for a few years now, but hitting the D key to bring that to your mouse pointer. So now you can truly model with the feature tree cleared, and you can really minimize your mouse movement. It's a great way to be working. If you can do that, it'll really speed up the way that you model. Okay, I have a couple of selection tips here. We have previous selection, select other, and select tangency. Previous select is my favorite of these because it's extremely powerful, and I understand how frustrating it can be when you're going through, picking a bunch of things, and then you misclick or something and you can't get it back, right? So let's take a look at this. This is select other. Imagine I was picking 1,000 faces. I don't know why I would do that, but imagine. And if I misclicked, I got distracted, what have you, I would have to pick them all again, but through the right-click menu, I can hit the command for previous select. Great. Next, I have select other. This is a command that allows you to select through geometry or select things that are not shown deliberately, right? Below your mouse pointer, SOLIDWORKS understands what's there, okay? And the last tip here is select tangency. You can get that by right-clicking on an edge, and it will select the tangency there. But my favorite is previous select, and probably the most useful to me is select other, but that's not that great looking of a tip. We have selection filters here. A pro tip, a lot of power users will have their filters docked somewhere, maybe the bottom of your screen, so you can have easy access to this, right? You can turn the filters on or off by hitting F6 or F5, and they're very useful to control basically whatever you're selecting. So let's take a look at that. Here, I'll hit F6, turns on my filters. See, you can see that little funnel thing. I get a lot of questions, hey, what's this symbol next to my mouse? I can't pick anything. F5 brings up the selection filters, the toolbar, so now you can actively pick faces, edges, bodies, 1, 2, 3 of them, 4 of them. And here's that pro tip, just move it down somewhere, and it'll snap and become docked then to your interface. Okay, so F6 turns them on and off. F5 brings up the window, the filter manager, and then docking it was the next tip. Command search, this is by far my favorite out of all 60 of these, and I will just get right into it. There's a lot that you can do with it. Up at the top, I use this all the time. I just start typing, right? So here I'm starting to type COS, it filters through. I can find a command by clicking the eyeglass. This is not me moving my mouse. That's not my arrow. That's SOLIDWORKS pointing out where the command is. So that's useful, so now I can learn. Or I could just enter a command up top and then launch it directly without knowing where it is. So that's the only place I need to go to start looking for commands. Like here I have the combine command. Okay? And the last thing I can do with this is I can drag and drop from the command manager onto my, from the command search onto my command manager, so I can customize on the fly. If I know I'm going to be using this combine or this split tool or something pretty often, consider searching for it and then dragging and dropping it and adding it to the command manager on the fly. 11, shortcut bars. These are context-sensitive shortcut bars that come up that are sensitive for sketches, parts, drawings, and assemblies. So let's take a look at these. It's really great because there's a lot of different ways that you can focus on the graphics area. You're not looking around, you're really focusing on your model, directly on your model. You're not digging through menus, and that is not just an easier and better way to work, it's much more efficient for us as users. So I'm modeling entirely with the S key here. I just keep hitting the S key to get every command I'd want. This is fully customizable for sketches, parts, assemblies, and drawings. Definitely consider using the S key. I'm sure a lot of you guys already are, but if you're not, please consider using it. Customizing, let's talk about customizing this. So I'll share with you how to customize the heads-up toolbar, and I'll also show you mouse gestures. Mouse gestures are great because you can model very quickly with just wiggling your mouse. All right, wiggle your mouse and just swipe over a command, you don't even see it. So I like to do customizing of the heads-up display to get a couple of commands, maybe normal to or measure. Right, so I find that command, customize ... and just drag and drop, right? So all I'm showing you here is how to customize your interface. Just drag and drop from the customize window. All right, so I'll add measure, I'll add normal to there. All right. If I want to take something off, it's just a drag and drop to delete it from it. All right, now this is mouse gestures. This wheel that comes up by right-clicking and moving with my mouse just a little bit. I'm just wiggling my mouse. That's all it was. And then you'll see I start to accelerate. I get a little bit faster with it. I start swiping over the commands, and I get really quickly into it. I'm not, hunting around for a key on the keyboard. I'm just using my mouse and swiping over something. All right, so that's mouse gestures. Next, we have Save SOLIDWORKS Settings. If you are going to do an install or an upgrade, or you want to go somewhere else and work on a different machine, or maybe you came here to SOLIDWORKS World or 3D Experience World, and you wanted to take a certification, you want to bring your settings with you. So I'll show you how to do that, right? This is the Copy Settings wizard. You can save and restore your settings to a file that you can share somewhere in Dropbox, email it, or keep it on a flash drive, okay? So here's how you save your settings. You go through, you check what you want, browse, find the location where you want it to be. And then that's where it is. It could be a flash drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, 3D Experience Drive. Doesn't matter. As long as you can find it because you need it now. Once you're inside of SOLIDWORKS, you can click Restore Settings, and now you browse out, find the file. Here we go. I'm going to go, it's in my OneDrive, and I'll find it right there. Hit Next, finish. Now my interface has been customized to my liking, right? That's my settings. I take that with me. I make sure I know where it is so I can load that up. Browse Open Documents. This menu shows you what is actually open. It's a great way to go through your parts. The Control tab is the hotkey to do that. So let's take a look at that. There's two ways to get to it. Up at the top, the window command, it lists everything that's open, right? So that's what was there. Or Control tab allows you to cycle through these so you can quickly get to your open files. Maybe you're going back and forth between things, right? And you don't want to tile the windows, for example, right? You want your full screen SOLIDWORKS. So window command, the window menu, drop down lists them. Control tab is the shortcut to go ahead through them. Filtering the feature manager. I can't tell you how many people had no idea, me too for a little while, years. I didn't realize that there was a filter bar at the top of the feature manager. So let's take a look at that. All you need to do is click your mouse up there and start typing. And if you're smart with the way you name your parts, your features, your sketches, this can become a very useful tool to you. So now I could start to filter through here and find these features, right? I don't have to go searching for them. But it's really powerful here in an assembly mode because as I filter through the feature tree, it also filters the graphics area. So now it's basically hiding everything that isn't shown now in the feature tree. So that's some added functionality there to the filtering command at the top of the feature tree. Flatten tree view, this is one, I just want to point out that it's there, right? I don't want you to be confused if you see a part that has this, how someone got theirs set up this way. You can choose to do this if you want. It's a setting on the tree display. So what it does is it takes everything out of the nested format and lists everything at the same level. So here's your regular tree, right? Notice I have a lot of sweeps, a lot of multiple features with multiple sketches. If I right-click at the top, go to Tree Display, hit Show Flattened Tree View, it will then list everything at the same level, okay? So that's what I'm doing here. Tree Display, Show Flat Tree View. Nothing has been nested or indented in there. Collapsing the tree. You guys are probably working with very large assemblies, right? And your tree gets pretty messy. You have a lot of sub-assemblies and sub-assemblies and sub-assemblies, and your tree gets very long. Well, instead of scrolling all the way through it, I suggest using Shift-C or the command for collapsing the tree to make it all nice and neat again. So here we go. I got an assembly. A lot of parts, a lot of sub-assemblies listed here. Shift-C is a shortcut to collapse the tree, so check that out. Nice and neat. Shift-C to collapse the tree. Or I could right-click and get it that way too. So I want you guys to be aware that that's what that is. Collapse items, right there. Folders in the tree. If you guys are keen on organizing your feature tree, I suggest using Add to Folder. It's a good way to organize things like your hardware, certain types of features. Right, so let's take a look at that. I have a couple of parts here. For example, these feet. I click them all. The hardware as well. I right-click, add to new folder. So now I'm going to start to organize my tree. I can give it a name. Now it just becomes much more clean, organized, and a much better way for me to work. So that is folders in the feature tree. Now I got some what I call nuggets in the tree. These are two things that I suggest taking a look at, consider using them. One is sensors and one is the design binder. Sensors and design binder, these are things that will get listed in your feature tree so you can always access them. And you'll always have available there properties like the mass or things like measurement or interference detection, proximity things, right? So when it's there and active and in your face, you're much more aware of that, right? Or you can use it for things like simulation results if you always want to know what's the stress or the factor of safety. So you don't have to go digging and searching for these things. You can have it be listed in your tree. And then the design binder is a way to add documents to your tree. All right, so let's take a look at both of these. So to see them, you have to go to Hidden Tree Items. You right-click on the top of the tree, Hide Show Tree Items, and now you can turn these on to show. So now they're there. I have the design binder. This is what the design binder looks like. I want to attach a document to it. So now this PDF will live and reside inside of my SOLIDWORKS file right there in my feature tree. Here I can go ahead and find that document, and it's linked. The physical document itself is linked now, and it goes for the ride with your SOLIDWORKS part. All right, next. Sensors. Custom views. These are good if you're going to really want to make marketing images, or you always want to capture a particular view, or you want to pre-set up certain things that you want to have in a drawing, in a 2D drawing. So let's take a look at that. So there's two things we can do. We can save it just to this document, or we can make it a global SOLIDWORKS view, so it's always available. Now, how do I get to it? Well, you have to have this orientation window open. You get to that by hitting the space bar. And then you can hit that new named view button. So now, whatever orientation, the zoom level and orientation has been saved now. And then you can give it a name. All right, so I'm calling this front hinge. Notice in the lower left-hand corner, it has that name of that view. Now, I can always get to these views. Right now, it's only in this document. But if I move my mouse over and then I hit that save icon, it now becomes a saved view globally for all of my parts inside of SOLIDWORKS. Rotating about an entity. This is one that I like to point out. It's very useful, but this is one that I think some people accidentally find themselves doing. So the way you do this is you middle mouse click on top of an entity. It gets highlighted in purple, and then that's what you're rotating about. So let's take a look at this. So middle mouse click on it, it's now purple, and now I can rotate holding the middle mouse wheel, and it's going to rotate about that entity. So whatever I picked is going to determine the degrees of freedom and the range of motion. So now I can start to preview certain motions. I'm not just tumbling my model around now, right? I can rotate it about particular entities, faces, vertices, faces, edges, okay? Cylindrical faces are very useful. Zoom to fit, this is one that's very, very useful. And the shortcut for that is to hit the F key, okay? So you're zoomed in on something and you just want to zoom out or fit everything in to your screen. There's zoom to fit. So let's take a look at that. There's a couple of ways to do it. You can hit F, double-click the middle mouse wheel, and there's also a icon, a command that you can pick. So I'm zoomed in here pretty close. That's the zoom to fit button up there on the heads-up display. Sorry, that was quick, but It's up there on the heads-up display. Here, I don't know where my model is. Okay, well, let me hit F, and it'll bring everything right in there. So it's a good way to know maybe you have something off in space. You're rotating your model, things are behaving weird. Hit the F key and see how it orients the model, right? It fits all of your geometry into the screen. So F, or double-clicking the middle mouse wheel, or hitting the command up on the command manager. Now, normal to. This isn't a tip that normal to exists. This is a tip on a way to customize the way it's going to be normal to, okay? So the first thing is just some extended functionality here. Normal to once, you're looking at it, you hit normal to again, it flips it around, and you can do that all day. But then the next tip here is how to do a custom orientation of your normal to. The first face determines the normal, and then the second face determines its orientation, right? So you're just basically rotating it around. Let's take a look at this. So here's normal to. Click it once, nothing new there, but click it again, and you can rotate to the back side, the positive or negative side. Just keep flipping it around. Now here is the custom orientation. Click one face. Click the second face. That's going to be the up orientation. Now I hit normal to, so that's my custom normal to orientation. If you want to determine how you want this to look, you can. I'll click this face now, and then I'll hit normal to. That's going to be my up orientation. Does that make sense? Cool. Zoom to selection. This is a great way to, especially if you have large assemblies, to really zoom in on a particular area of your subassembly. It zooms right in and fits whatever you clicked on to your screen. So let's take a look at this. I click on this one little tiny component. I hit the zoom to selection. It brings me right to it. Okay, so consider using that, especially if you have large assemblies. It saves you a lot of time instead of playing that game of zooming in and moving your mouse as you zoom in, you know. We all know it. Okay? Rotate about scene floor. This is something that gets saved with the document. So sometimes you might open up someone else's document and it looks like this, especially looks like that symbol there, that mouse symbol, the rotate symbol with the line through it. That means rotate about scene floor has been turned on. It's a property of that file. Okay? And it basically determines the way the model moves around. It fixes the floor so you can't tumble it around, and it becomes very difficult to navigate, but it maintains stability in your model, so it makes it look better if you're doing a presentation. So let's take a look at this. Here, I'll do the exact same mouse movement. I just move it from left to right, and it starts to tumble upside down. Okay, that's nothing new. Now let's go to modify, and I'll hit the rotate about scene floor option. Now this is turned on. Now I'll do the same motion, but notice how that floor plane has been fixed. It doesn't rotate or tumble upside down now. It basically keeps it stable. As hard as I try, I'm not going to be able to flip that model upside down. And it can become incredibly frustrating if you don't know that that exists, and you don't know that someone else did that. And if you hit save, then that becomes the way that this model is going to behave. So pointing out here that that exists and ways to understand it and how to turn it back off. The reference triad. All right, let's just go right to the video on this one. Basically, we're going to focus on the reference triad and different ways that you can use the functionality of it to help rotate your model, okay? So if I just start clicking on those lines, it basically goes normal to those planes. So I can graphically click on them to go normal to those axes. Great. But if I shift and click them, it starts to rotate. So now I'm rotating 90 degrees. 90 degrees about this one, okay? And now 15 degrees if I hit the Alt key. So the Alt key does it that way. And if I want to change the direction, I hold the Control key. So it's Control Alt or Control Shift and click those things from the axes from the reference triad, and it will change the direction around. Okay, so there's some functionality there that you guys have. Now we're going to move on to sketching. So sketch relations. This is something that was added, I believe, in SOLIDWORKS 2016. And it's a really easy way to add sketch relations using that shared or common vertex. All right, so you don't have to hold control and pick multiple lines. You can just click the shared vertex and add it very quickly. So it's a huge time saver. You just have to remember that it exists. I find myself all the time forgetting that. Just click the shared vertex right there, and then the appropriate or the acceptable commands come up, and I can quickly add that. Here I'll add a tangent relationships. The key here is to just remember that that exists, because we get into our habits, right? And we've been working that way for years and years and years. I do that too. Just want to explain these things to you guys, that's there. It's going to save you a lot of time. Whenever I can remember it, I'm pretty proud of myself that I remembered that. I don't know if you guys have that feeling. Window and lasso select. So there's two ways that you can select components: a box select, which we call window select, or the lasso tool. Lasso tool was released a few years ago. But a tip about these two tools is that if you go from left to right, or if you go from right to left, or clockwise and counterclockwise, it behaves differently. And I find a lot of people don't realize that. Okay? So when it's blue, it's just left to right or clockwise. It selects entities only within it, entirely within it. From right to left, or counterclockwise, selects anything that the box or the lasso tool touches. Let's take a look at this. Now, the box or lasso select is a permanent tool that's on all the time, so you have to toggle between one or the other. All right, so now I went from right to left, and it picks every single thing that the box touches. Now, how do I change it to lasso select? I right-click, hit selection tools, go to lasso select. And now I start drawing a circle around that. Right, that's pretty cool. I could have done that with a box select, right? That's not too impressive. But what is impressive is when you start to make these really complicated ones, like I want to select everything but these two guys. You can't do that with the box select. So you can get a lot of granularity there in the way you can deliberately pick things and realize that going from left to right or from right to left will act differently when you use these tools. Now, disabling auto relations. Imagine you're sketching and you have a lot of stuff going on. This can get incredibly annoying when you have all these dashed lines, all these witness lines, everything coming up in your face. Obviously, all that information is great, but how do you turn them off so you can model cleanly? Hold the control key. And the second you release the control key, auto relations are back on. So let's take a look at that. Here I got some geometry. Now I have these auto relations coming up, all these dashed lines, everything, right? As long as I hold the control key like I am right now, no matter how hard I try, I can't add those relations. Nothing is snapping. It's a clean way for me to model. The second I let go of the control key, then the thing starts snapping and it gets back to normal. Okay, so consider holding the control key to disable auto relations on the fly. Power trim, known as the SOLIDWORKS Weed Whacker. This is one of my favorite tools. I highly recommend using it. Anything your mouse crosses over will be trimmed and deleted. But the tip here is how you can undo power trim, because this is a really powerful tool, and you start modeling quickly, you can delete things accidentally. So how do you undo it without, okay, obviously Control Z, but how do you undo it using the cool, slick way to do it? So let's take a look at that. Trim entities, power trim. I hold my mouse. Anything I cross over gets deleted, right, like that. But if I want to undo something, all I have to do is trace back over those red squares that show up, and I can undo the power trim on the fly like that. So all you have to do, cross over that red square, undoes it. And a side tip here, power trim can also power extend as long as you start on top of an entity. Okay, so it's not always trimming. As long as you start on top of an entity, click and drag, it then becomes power extend. Okay, so there's another tip. 31, dimensioning to tangencies. So the shortcut here is to leverage the shift key to add dimensions to tangencies. All right? There is a way to do it inside a menu going to the properties, but this is the slick, cool way to do it, and it's much more quicker to model graphically. So here's a regular dimension. Here's how I can do it in the menu here. I change the leader line options, and I start clicking min, max, center, and I can change these around through the menu. But that's just changing it after it's already been added. How do I add these tangent relationships while I'm doing it on the fly? So you hold the shift key to do it, right? Here's just a regular dimension. Now I'll hold shift and I'll pick both of these, and it adds a tangent dimension. And I'll do this again, except this time I won't hold shift and it'll be a center. I'll hold shift here and now it's a tangent, right? So when you're holding the shift key, whatever you pick is the tangent dimension. It could be one, it could be both, or none, then you're back to normal, right? So dimension to tangency on the fly. Create a sketch on a model edge. This one was a question that was asked of me. How can you do this? And all you have to do is pick an edge, hit the sketch button, and you're sketching on a plane perpendicular to that line that you clicked on, right? So all it takes is this. Click on the edge, hit sketch. Now you have a plane there and you're sketching. You blinked, you missed it, right? I can get out of that sketch and now I have a reference plane, right? So I have that edge, hit sketch, I have a reference plane there. So it's also a quick way to add a reference plane. You can always edit it later, but you see normal or perpendicular to that model edge and coincident to the end point closest to which you picked. Fully defining your sketches. Sometimes this is a great command for when you really want to be lazy. You can add 100 dimensions in a second, and your boss doesn't need to know. So let's take a look at this. Now, I don't know if this is good or not, but it's there, and it's extremely powerful. So, fully defining your sketches, you can do this by selected entities, right? These three things. Calculate. Now I have the dimensions necessary to fully define that sketch. Or I can do every entity. And this is what I mean by I don't know if this is a good thing, right? Because it becomes a mess. I don't know if that's how I would have actually dimensioned it, but now it's fully defined and it looks like I just did a lot of work, right? So if you want to quickly add a lot of dimensions, fully defined sketch is the way to go. Changing your sketch type. The tip here is you can hit the A key instead of moving your mouse from the center of the graphics area up to the top to change from a corner rectangle to a center point rectangle. You can just hit the A key and start cycling through all these things so you don't have to go up to the top and take your focus away from the center of the screen, okay? And you can also auto-transition to an arc between a line and arc, and it's a quick way to add tangent arcs. So let's take a look at that. All I'm showing you here is that the A key cycles through all those different commands, right? Rectangles, slots, there's a lot of different types of these entities that can be added, so hitting the A key just cycles through them, right? Now, I'm drawing a line, I hit the A key here, it turns into an arc. So that's a good way to auto-transition into an arc. And there's even slicker ways to do that, but the tip here is it's the A key to do that. Horizontal and vertical relationships. Here, what I'm showing you is how to tell if it's going to be horizontal or vertical, right? It's a little bit more insight because if you're looking at your model all skewed at a weird angle or a weird plane, you might not know, are these 2 points, should they be horizontal or should they be vertical, right? And it highlights whichever is the closer of the two. So then you get some more information and you can interpret that and then pick the right one, okay? So should these 2 points be horizontal or vertical if I want to line them up? Well, it's telling me it should probably be vertical because that's what it's closest to. And that's kind of what I wanted. If I wanted them to be lined up the other way, I could have taken that, interpreted that signal, and then clicked the right one, okay? Also, the one that's highlighted in bold over in the left-hand side of the screen, same thing. It's the one that is closest to, right? So that's all I'm showing you here, so you can understand what SOLIDWORKS is telling you and make informed decisions. Creating a single line. I love sharing this one because if you just have the line tool on, it's going to create multiple lines until you do things like double-click or hit the escape key, right? So you can click, drag, and release to add one line at a time. So let's show that. Single line. Click, click, click. That's your default line tool. Same line tool, but I would click and hold and release. I can draw one at a time. So click and release one at a time. And it still adds relationships too. If I click and snap it right on top of there, I'm adding those relationships on the fly. So a single line can be added by clicking, dragging, and releasing, kind of like a rubber band style. Arc dimensions. Here's a tip to add a arc length dimension with a smart dimension. It involves you picking the arc and its 2 endpoints, and with those 3 things, you can add this arc dimension. It's not just the diameter of it, right? It's the arc length. So 1, 2, 3, with the smart dimension tool, there's my true arc dimension. Right? So 1, that's just like the radius of it, but I click here with the control key, and I don't stop, I keep going. Now I got that. Perfect. All right. Close model, close sketch to model. Here's another tip if you want to be lazy and sometimes that's modeling smarter, right? Easiest way is probably the best way. So you don't have to draw or finish your profiles. You can use model edges to close the profile for a sketch to be used for a feature. So let's take a look at this. Again, just imagine I wasn't being so lazy when I did this, right? It's 2 lines. I could have just continued it, but then I wouldn't have the tip to show you. So it says, hey, do you want to close with model edges? The arrow is pointing outward because I have geometry down there. No, I want it to go this way, and that is going to be the contour or the shape for my extrusion. So you can close your open profiles as long as they line up with your model geometry. Sketch Expert. Consider using this tool, especially if you are running into some issues with your sketching. You add an extra relationship, you add too many dimensions, it becomes overdefined, overconstrained, things are conflicting, unsolvable. Here's how you can diagnose that with an automated tool to help walk you through the process. Right, so here I have an overdefined thing, I click on it in the bottom, it launches Sketch Expert. And then diagnosing it gives me options. It says I can delete the tangent relationship, then it'll look like this. I can do that, it'll look like this. I can do this, it'll look like that. Which one do you want? When I get the appropriate one that I want, I can hit accept, or I can look at all of the ones that are causing the conflict and I can delete one of them, and I can fix that too. So Sketch Expert is a tool that brings you directly to an interface that presents you with options that could fix your sketch issues by automatically showing you what it looks like, or presenting you with a list of the things that are causing problems so that then you can manually delete them. So consider using the Sketch Expert if you're having issues with your sketch. The biad. I love adding angle dimensions this way. You don't need to add construction geometry to add angle dimensions. So let me show you how to do that, all right? And the tip on how to make this work is you click the line you want the angle to, and then its endpoint, and then you pick these lines that represent the construction geometry, right? So here's what I want to add. I want that angle. Okay, that's what I'm going to add, but this time without that construction geometry. So here's the line, here's the point, and now the biad. I pick what would be the construction geometry, and I'm doing that all without any additional sketch geometry. Okay? And it works in drawings too. Okay? So I have the biad up here in a drawing, and now I can use that line to add my angle dimension, right? So it's the actual model edge or the sketch geometry, and then the end point, and then you can use the biad. All right? Spin box increments. First tip is that thing on the left-hand side at the bottom of the modify is actually a thumb wheel. I was shocked when I heard that too. I didn't really think it looked like a thumb wheel, but hey, it does. And then the other one is a slider. The difference there is, the one on the right is a slider because it has a fixed minimum and a fixed maximum, typically for things like angles. But the dimensions, you could be positive or negative, and it's spinning it all over the place there. But the real tip here is you can change the speed to 1/10 or 10x by using the Alt or Control key, or you can also add your own custom increments if you want to. Okay, so say you want to increment it at 2.5 or 8, right? Or 12, for example. So let's see first how to add custom values, and then how you can change the speeds, okay? So custom spin box increments. I'm in the modify the dimension dialog box. Here, I'm adding a couple. I click that button. That's the spin box increment button right there at the top of the modify dialog box. I'll show that again here. So here, I'm incrementing it. I can add one to it, and now that becomes the spin box increments. And now I'll start using keyboard shortcuts here to change the speed. So Alt or Control. One is 10x, and one is 1/10. So this is just your standard default behavior. Now I hold the Alt key, it becomes 1/10. And then I hold the Control key, and now it's 10x. Okay, so you got a lot of keyboard shortcuts there to multiply it or reduce it, or you can add these custom values too. All right, so again, custom values, then Alt and Control key to help change it on the fly. Single command per pick. I want to point out that this is a way that you can choose to work if you want to. It's a system option that allows you to sketch just one circle or one line at a time using single command per pick. Okay, it's a system option. Or you could double click on it and then it acts like default, right? So here's single command per pick, right? One circle. I go up, I got to add another circle, right? Single command per pick. Or I could double click the command and I'm sketching like default. So the tip here is that this exists. It's a system option that I'm just informing you that exists if this is how you want to work. Some people like it. But personally, I'm an out-of-the-box kind of guy. So, all right, single command per pick. Pierce versus coincident. Here, I just want to point out what's the difference, okay? Coincident is more general, and Pierce is one unique point, one unique place. It's the point where an entity passes through the plane. Coincident is where the projection of it, an infinite projection, passes through the plane. Okay, so that's the difference. Coincident is the projection, infinite projection onto a plane, and I'll show you what I mean by infinite, and Pierce is that one unique spot. So here is convert entities. I'll take that edge and I'll convert it onto the plane, and that's its projection, right? So it's coincident with that plane. So now I'm just showcasing that that point is on that plane. Now here I'm going to pierce it, and it's only that one particular point where the plane and that edge intersects. Does that make sense? Right, so the coincident is the infinite projection. As long as it lines up with the projection, you can move it along the direction. Pierce is that one particular point, okay? Here's another system option that you guys can choose to work with. I don't know if I recommend it or not. I'm sure there's a good use for it, but I'm basically just pointing out that this exists as a system option that you can choose to work. So it allows you to override the dimensions when you drag an entity. So that circle looks like it's defined, but if I just start dragging it, I can actually override it. So I want you guys to be aware that that exists, and that's what that option means. So you can see how this could really mess things up, right? So you guys need to be aware that this exists. And if you have a good reason for why you might want to use this, please share it with me later. Right? So just be aware that this is there. Derived sketch. This is a way to copy your sketch, but not just a copy, it's linking it, okay? Derived sketch basically copies a sketch, puts it on another plane, but you can't edit it. You can only locate it. So if you make changes to the parent sketch, the changes update, right? So it's a good way to, not just a copy, but it's a linked copy or a derived copy, all right? So let's take a look at this. Here I have this manifold, I have this sketch for that flange, I want to put it on that face. So I say derived sketch, and I put it on that face. All I can do with the derived sketch is locate it, okay? I look at all of my sketch tools, they're all grayed out because it's a derived sketch, okay? But that doesn't matter because all the changes I might want to do are going to be in that parent copy. So say, for example, here I want to delete those two holes. I delete those holes, the derived sketch updated. So it's that linked copy that's always going to be there, right? So I'm copying, pasting it onto another plane, but it's a linked copy. Resetting on dragging, this is one that happens to a lot of people accidentally. Say you're moving your model around, if you accidentally right-click, it goes back to where it was before. So here's one I just want to point out that it happens accidentally. So I'm moving my stuff around, and I just right-click, it goes back to normal, okay? So you're moving your sketch geometry around, and you're moving stuff around, right-click, brings it back to where it was. There you go. That happens accidentally, pointing out that SOLIDWORKS isn't this possessed piece of software. You just accidentally hit the right mouse button. Performance evaluation, definitely recommend taking a look at this. This is a good way to understand if you're having performance issues with your model and where that might be. If performance is something that's important to you, you're running into performance issues, it's slowing you down, here's the first place you should go to look to see what could be causing that. So it's a good way to understand the root cause of performance issues if you're having them, all right? So this is things like you can start to see rebuild times. So say, for example, something takes a long time to rebuild, that would be the first place I would look to understand the implications it has on the performance of your model. And then for assemblies, you can learn a lot, right? You can get into the mates, you can run diagnostics. It's a lot more robust set of tools there in performance evaluation. So let's take a look at that. Evaluate, performance evaluation, here it is. This is just basically telling me the time in seconds and the percentage of the total rebuild time for that feature. So I use this tool to identify any performance issues, features that might be causing performance issues with my model. All right, so that's the tip. Use performance evaluation, open it up, take a look at what is taking a long time to rebuild in your model. And now with that information, you can consider using the feature freeze. This is an option that needs to be turned on, but now you can drag the rollback bar from the top down and it locks everything up so it no longer rebuilds. That also means you can't edit it, but if something's taking a long time to rebuild, you can freeze it and then you can get some performance back in your model. All right, so that's one way we would use performance evaluation and then extend that lesson we learned, use the feature freeze bar to help save us some time. All right, so let's take a look at that. So dragging this down from the top, the padlock symbol means it's frozen. I can't edit it, but that also means it's not participating in the rebuild. So my model is going to feel a lot more lightweight and it will perform better. See, I could take a look at this and my performance percentage and times are a lot better than they were. Quick up to surface. This is a great way to add an extruded boss up to surface without actually going into the menus. So let's take a look at this. I have that, I open the command, and I just double click on the face. Just double click right on the face, and it's an up to surface. You don't have to go digging through menus. So as long as you know that that's there, that functionality exists, you launch the command, double click, you're extruding up to surface. Quick up to surface. Dynamically loading FeatureWorks. You don't have to go actively launching the FeatureWorks command and step through the wizard or pick features that you want to actually recognize. You can do this on the fly dynamically. So you have an imported model and all you have to do is hit the edit feature button on the context bar. The tip is click on a feature, the chamfer, a hole, a boss, hit edit feature. It'll load up FeatureWorks to recognize that particular feature that you just clicked. So let's take a look at this. Here I have this imported part, that's a fillet. I hit edit feature, it recognizes the fillet. Here's a chamfer, edit feature, it recognizes the chamfer. Here's a hole, edit feature. So I'm doing this on the fly. So obviously one part, 3 features, okay, not too impressive. But imagine you had a large part with a lot of stuff on it and you wanted to change a fillet, you wanted to change a hole or something. So you can dynamically load this on the fly. The tip there is click on it and then hit edit feature. And with that, you can dynamically load FeatureWorks and start working on your imported models. Split lines, the tip here is that this exists, and it's a good way to help split up your geometry into multiple faces. It's very, very useful for simulation tools, and it's also useful so that you can add things like decals or appearances to particular faces. Or maybe you're needing to do surface modeling and you want to split faces up. This is the tool to do that. So basically, the tip is that it exists. I have these 2 lines. It's that easy. It takes a sketch. You project that sketch onto one face, and then it splits it up based on that sketch. Very simple, very easy. With those 2 lines using the split line command, I'm able to take one face and split it up into those. So very, very useful for simulation and a lot of other aspects of the tool as well. So split lines, breaking up your faces. With mate. We already talked about this earlier where I showed you how you can quickly add it. Yes. So now I want to show you in detail a little bit more about the with mate, all right? Instead of just pre-selecting them like I was showing you earlier. So we click these 4 faces, with mate centers it, right? It's been added to the context menu recently. And it centers the geometry between those 4 faces. Sorry, I was doing a mid-plane earlier. This is the with mate, right? So it's the centering mate. And check this out. This is my favorite mate when I'm putting things, I'm lining them up. I like to use this one because it's very quick, very easy. It's all graphical. I don't need to go through digging for planes and center lines and things like that. Centers everything. But there's also a lot more extended capabilities in there. So when I am adding this mate, you can basically add limits to it too. So you can have limit with mate. So you can center it and say it can move 10 millimeters this way through this range or a particular percentage. So take a look at this. This has been a great mate for many, many years, and it's been added. The capabilities have been extended. So definitely check that one out. Hiding and showing components. This is a great way to, on the fly, hide components. So I hit the tab key to hide them or show them using the shift tab, okay? So tab or shift tab is how you can do this. Here's tab. Just mouse over it, no clicking necessary. Whatever's directly under my mouse gets hidden. Now you do need to remember where that part was, so you can go back to it and hit shift tab, because it's got to be directly under your mouse, right? Shift tab gets right back into it, right? Tab to hide, and then shift tab to show hidden components. Now remember, it's got to be directly under your mouse. But if you want to show all hidden components, you can control shift tab, and on the fly, it'll show you all of the hidden components. So let's take a look at that. Here's what it's going to look like. On the left, I have the hidden components. On the right, it's showing me them in this blue, transparent way. So control shift tab, that's all it is. Control shift tab, it shows everything. So you can, on the fly, look at what's hidden, and then you can start to hold shift tab to show it again. Okay, so there's some tab to hide, shift tab to show, control shift tab to dynamically, on the fly, show everything that's been hidden. Rotate components. Just like the left mouse button moves components around the graphical area as long as it's allowed to, not made it in place, you can right mouse button on top of something and start to rotate it. All right, so showing you a quick way to do that. Here's left mouse, something we all know, but the right mouse button, on the fly, as long as I right-click and hold and drag over top of it, I can rotate my components. So I can easily start to pre-position them or move them around, right? Left-click drags, right-click rotates. Assembly visualization. Definitely take a look at this tool to help you visualize graphically properties of your components, right? You can color code them based on properties, right? Is it a built part, purchased part? Who made it? What's it made out of? I like to do graphics triangles. It's more of a performance thing. A lot of the work that we have to do is investigate where performance issues might be. So assembly visualization is a great way to color code your model and look at it graphically. Let's take a look at it. It's under the Evaluate tool, hit Assembly Visualization, and I hit that color bar, and then it color codes everything. Blue is the bottom, red is the top, and I'm filtering based on total weight. If I want to change that, I hit the caret, and then now I'm looking at graphics triangles. So everything that's red is going to be super performance intensive. And imagine doing this for who made the part, what it's made out of, other properties of the model. Okay, it's a good way to color code it and understand your model. Open top-level assembly. This is one of my favorites. It's one of the 4 filters down in the lower right-hand corner of the open dialog box, and it immediately opens whatever the top-level assembly is in your dialog box. Now, I know it makes sense that you can filter for assemblies and then just pick the biggest one, right? You'd think that would be the top-level assembly, but that's not always the case. Most of the time it is, yes. But you could have stuff embedded in there. Just think virtual parts, for example, that might make a subassembly be larger. So this takes all of that guessing out of the equation. With one click, you can get directly into your top-level assembly. I use this all the time because I don't know which is the top-level assembly in here. I have one button to press, and it immediately brings me right to it. That's all the assemblies, but this is the top-level assembly, right? So you have these quick filters down in the lower right corner of the open dialog box for parts, assemblies, drawings, and the fourth one is open top-level assembly. All right? Show you that one more time. Lower right corner, I'm going to filter for assemblies. I get these 4 or 5, and the top-level assembly brings me directly to, without thinking anything of it, very quickly, the correct top-level assembly that I probably want to open. Control drag to copy. You can hold the control key and drag in the graphics area or on the feature tree to create copies of your components in an assembly. Very quickly making copies, just control drag. Works from the tree, works from the graphics area. I need 2 more of these screws. Control, drag away to add multiple copies. I need a couple more. Just like that, I just added 7 of those very, very quickly. All right? Control drag to copy components. Now you have components that are transparent. How do you pick them, right? Transparent geometry is not selectable. You have to hold the shift key to be able to pick it, right? So here's how we can do that. Now, I have that bed of this transparent, those arms are transparent. No matter how hard I try to pick that upright, it won't let me unless I hold the shift key. Right? Holding the shift key allows me to pick the transparent geometry like that. Here, no matter how hard I try, I can't pick the bed as long as I hold the shift key. Now I can pick transparent geometry. So there's a lot of functionality that's there with the control key, with the shift key, with the tab, right? So a good way to be modeling is probably one hand on your mouse and the left hand on the keyboard, right? You got the S key in there, you got control, shift, tab, the space bar, all these commands there at your fingertips. And the point is to just introduce you to them all. Now, isolating and display state. Isolating is a quick way to hide a component, show a component, and hide everything else. So whatever you pick, you isolate it. That's the only thing that's shown. But if you start doing that multiple times, you can capture that in what's called a display state. Okay, a display state saves things like colors or transparencies, hide items, shown items, things like that. So consider using display states as a way to capture that graphical information so you can quickly change between them. So here are these components. I want to isolate that. I right-click on it. I hit isolate. Now that's just the top portion of it. I hit save. That's saving a display state. So now I can quickly get back to that instead of having to go into that all the time, right? And where do display states live? Up at the top there. That caret shows me where my display states are. So now I can quickly get back to those, okay? And lastly, editing sketch plane on the fly. How many times do you dynamically go or deliberately go in there, hit edit sketch plane, you move it to a different plane, then you get errors or it's off to the side, right? If you hold the shift key and drag it from the tree, you can place it directly where you want and you don't get it off in space and stuff, right? So let's take a look at this. Here I clicked on the sketch, edit sketch plane. If I wanted to reposition it, this is the way we teach you how to do it. This is the more straightforward way. I want to put it on that base face. Click right there, hit OK, and it'll relocate that sketch, but it's going to be off to the side, or I'll get a rebuild error like that. OK. Now, if I want to do it dynamically, here's the tip. Hold the Shift key and drag it. Okay, the second you press Shift, you'll see it's no longer that crosshair, but now I'm changing the plane. So I can place it exactly where I want it, and it's going to start snapping to that plane. So hold Shift, drag it on top of the face that you want. You could locate it there, any other face. Drop it right there. You're not getting any rebuild errors, and obviously you can go in and redimension it and do whatever you need to actually locate it properly, but you can do that on the fly and save yourself some of those rebuild errors. And lastly, if you have any questions, email me. I have multiple versions of this up on my YouTube channel. I love connecting with you guys on LinkedIn. Here's my information. Email me, reach out to me. I get emails every day about this. People see this stuff, asking questions, and I'm more than happy to connect with you guys, and I love interacting with the community. So thank you all for joining me for this. I hope you learned something, at least one thing. All right, good. Thank you.